Delta Force is an elite special operations unit of the United States Army. It's one of the most secretive units in the world, often disguised as civilians or foreign forces, and known for extreme versatility. Recruitment is limited to the most capable soldiers, mainly drawn from the US Army Special Forces and the 75th Ranger Regiment. Selection lasts 4 weeks and is extremely demanding, passing an 18-mile night march with a 35-pound rucksack and a 40-mile march over rough terrain with 45 pounds are required. Those who pass enter a 6-month training including counterterrorism, protection of high-profile targets, unconventional warfare, and special reconnaissance. Their skills include sniping, close quarters combat, explosives, breaching, and espionage. They are trained to handle operations on aircraft, trains, ships, and vehicles, allowing them to take control of any scenario in any environment. Most missions remain classified. Known operations include the 83 invasion of Grenada, the 2001 hunt for Osama bin Laden, the 2015 Iraq hostage rescue, and the raid that took out ISIS leader al-Baghdadi. On January 3rd, 2026, Delta operators captured Venezuelan President Maduro and his wife. Fallschirmjäger were the airborne forces of the German Luftwaffe during World War II. They became one of the most feared units of the war. Armed with the Mauser 98K and FG-42, they were highly mobile and disruptive. They saw action during the invasion of Poland, the Battle of the Netherlands, and the Norwegian campaign. They later fought on the Eastern Front against the Red Army during the siege of Sevastopol, and in 1943 rescued Mussolini. Their most famous operation came in May 1940 with the assault on Eben Emael, Europe's strongest fortress. Despite being defended by 1,200 Belgian troops, 493 German soldiers captured it, forcing the Brits and French to leave Belgium and enabling the German advance that pushed the Allies toward Dunkirk. In the Greece campaign, they took a key bridge, seized British anti-aircraft positions, and captured around 12,000 Commonwealth and Greek troops. However, during the Battle of Crete, they suffered over 6,000 casualties, the highest loss rate of any single German operation. Hitler personally banned further large airborne operations afterward. After this, they fought as elite ground troops in Monte Cassino and Normandy. Their final parachute operation took place during the Battle of the Bulge, but rushed preparation and inexperienced troops caused the mission to fail. The Arditi were an elite special force of the Royal Italian Army during World War I, considered among the most feared units, when they broke through enemy defenses and trenches to open the way for larger infantry advances. Arditi were selected from the bravest soldiers willing to fight at close range. Training emphasized aggression, minimal cover, and shock tactics. Their motto, either we win or we all die. They painted skulls on their helmets and blackened their faces before assaults. Known for killing enemy soldiers with daggers and hand grenades, enemy troops abandoned trenches when Arditi were nearby. They also used flamethrowers and the Villa Perosa light machine gun. Their greatest success came at the Battle of Vittorio Veneto, where they broke through the Piave River line and enabled the final Italian victory over Austrian forces. The Arditi were disbanded after the war, but today Italy's Naval Special Operations Unit is regarded as their successor. The Gurkhas are soldiers from Nepal known for their bravery, loyalty, and discipline. They've served for over 200 years in the British and Indian armies, plus in UN peacekeeping missions worldwide. Gurkhas are known for exceptional physical endurance, partly attributed to high-altitude living in Nepal, which is said to have produced a genetic adaptation allowing more efficient oxygen use. Their selection process is among the most brutal in the world, with nearly 30,000 applicants competing each year for around 200 slots. Hill runs in the Himalayas carrying baskets filled with rocks, 75 bench jumps in 1 minute, and 70 sit-ups in 2 minutes are part of the trial. They are famous for their curved kukri knife, their hand-to-hand ferocity, and the motto, "Better to die than be a coward." Their fighting skill was recognized in the 19th century when British forces, despite better equipment and resources, struggled against the Gurkhas during the Anglo-Nepalese War of 1814-16. Impressed by their combat skills, the British East India Company negotiated a peace agreement that included the right to recruit Gurkhas into British service. During World War II, their reputation was reinforced by the acts of Gurkha Lakhiman Gurung. When his position was attacked by 200 Japanese soldiers, he continued fighting by throwing back grenades and firing his rifle with his left hand after losing most of his fingers on his right. He took out 31 enemies, forced a Japanese retreat, and was awarded the Victoria Cross. The winged Hussars were an elite heavy cavalry that served the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth for 200 years. They were equipped with the 13-foot-long kopia lance, swords and pistols. Their lighter saddles allowed both rider and horse to carry heavy armor without losing mobility. Hussar horses were specially bred to be fast, resilient, fearless in battle, and capable of charging under heavy load. They fought extensively against Ottoman, Swedish and Russian forces. Known for their shock tactics and massed charges, they broke enemy pike formations and impaled multiple enemies in a single charge. The sound of thousands of wings and hooves was deafening. Their most famous engagement was the Siege of Vienna in 1683. Alongside Holy Roman Empire forces, they led the largest cavalry charge in history, striking 150,000 Ottomans. Despite being heavily outnumbered, the charge shattered the Ottoman lines and forced a retreat. They also decisively won at the Battle of Klushino against a numerically superior Russian army, and at the Battle of Hodau, where 100 Hussars and 300 supporting cavalry held off around 40,000 Tatar soldiers. Changes in warfare and economic factors made them obsolete by 1776. The Impi were the elite warrior regiments of Shaka Zulu. Over 20 years, Shaka and his Impis expanded across southern Africa. Training began at the age of 6. Boys were required to accept stick-fighting challenges or face dishonor. Their original weapon was a long throwing spear, later replaced by the heavy-bladed Ikvla stabbing spear. Impi soldiers were known for their extreme endurance. They ran barefoot over thorn-filled terrain for 50 miles to harden their feet. Discipline was enforced, objections punished by death. Impis relied on rapid spear charges, encirclement and aggressive close combat, combined with a no-prisoners approach, very effective against regional enemies and early colonial forces. But their major weakness emerged with the arrival of European armies using modern firearms and artillery. Although the Zulus achieved a major victory over the British at the Battle of Isandlwana, smashing 1,300 troops in a single day, but the Brits came back and defeated them at the Battle of Ulundi. The Tercios were elite military units of the Spanish army during the Habsburg era. They formed the backbone of the empire's land forces and were among the most dominant on European battlefields for more than a century. Strict discipline, strong morale, and highly experienced soldiers were their strength. Tercios were trained for field battles, sieges, ship-to-ship combat, and amphibious assaults, making them super versatile. Their effectiveness came from combining pikemen, swordsmen, and musketeers to break enemy formations. At the Battle of Pavia in 1525, their mobile musketeers shifted to the flanks and inflicted decisive losses on the French. Even in defeat at the Siege of Castelnuovo, 4,000 Tercios inflicted heavy casualties on 50,000 Ottomans. At the Battle of Nördlingen, the Tercios crushed the Swedes. New tactics such as kneeling to let enemy gunfire pass overhead before answering with volleys allowed them to win. Spanish forces carried this system worldwide and built a global empire, until they were replaced by other regiments in the early 18th century. Jaguar Warriors were an elite unit of the Aztec military that dominated much of Mesoamerica between the 14th and 16th centuries. They were feared for their bravery, fought on the front lines, broke enemy forces, and captured prisoners for sacrifice. To become a Jaguar warrior, a soldier had to capture 4 enemies in a single battle. They wore intimidating Jaguar-themed armor and believed the animal's strength was transferred to them in battle. Their main weapon was the Makwa Weedle, a wooden club edged with obsidian blades capable of decapitating a horse in a single strike. But they also used spears and atlatls. They fought against the Tlaxcalans, Mixtecs, Zapotecs, and Mayas. When the Spanish arrived with firearms, metal weapons, and horses, the Jaguar warriors fought fiercely and came close to destroying them. But in 1521, Cortés returned with over 1,000 Spaniards and around 80,000 indigenous allies. The Jaguar warriors resisted for 3 months, refusing to surrender, but hunger and smallpox led to defeat. The Janissaries were elite infantry soldiers of the Ottoman Empire and served as the Sultan's personal bodyguards, known for strict discipline, cohesion and loyalty. Originally recruited through the devshirme blood tax system, they were taken as young Christian boys, converted to Islam and trained from childhood for war. They were forbidden to marry until 40 and lived under harsh conditions that reinforced unity and obedience. Their training lasted 6 years under constant supervision by eunuchs and separation from civilian life. Janissaries were organized into smaller expert groups, including engineers, sappers, explosive specialists, and sharpshooters, and were often led into battle by the Sultan himself. They began as skilled archers and later integrated muskets into their arsenal ahead of many European forces. They could fire accurately at long range with one hand and were known for fast reloading. But they were also skilled with many melee weapons. They fought in all major Ottoman campaigns, including the fall of Constantinople, the Ottoman Mamluk War, and conflicts against Hungary and Austria. While loyal to the dynasty, they often opposed individual sultans and took part in rebellions. In 1826, Sultan Mahmud II decided to modernize the army. This triggered a revolt that got 4,000 Janissaries killed and thousands imprisoned, ending them after nearly 4 centuries. The samurai were the warrior class of feudal Japan, following Bushido, a code demanding discipline, loyalty, and ritual seppuku for dishonor or capture. Dojo training began at age 7. Swords, archery, spears, riding, and unarmed combat were on the menu. The first real sword came by 13. Sword masters like Miyamoto Musashi felt dozens in duels. Samurai dominated Japan for 700 years, repelling the Mongol invasions in 1274 and 81 with a little help from typhoons. They also fought massive battles like Sekigahara, where 160,000 samurai fought for control over Japan. But eventually, the samurai and their skills were just made obsolete and replaced by a modern army. The Satsuma Rebellion marked their final stand. 40,000 samurai died, showing katanas could not withstand peasants with rifles and machine guns. The Swiss Reisläufer were medieval pikemen and halberdiers, considered the most feared mercenary infantry in Europe. Rulers competed aggressively to hire them. At the Battle of Morgarten and later at Sempach, they crushed Austria and killed Duke Leopold. They also defeated invading Burgundians. They were known for aggressive tactics, constant forward movement, and relentless pressure. They advanced in tight columns, relying on speed rather than defense. At the Battle of St. Jakob under Biers, 1,600 Swiss pikemen faced around 30,000 French. Although they were defeated, their resistance was so effective that the French retreated. Reisläufer charges were unstoppable until the use of artillery and firearms made them obsolete. They inspired German Landknechts and the Swiss Guard of the Vatican. Teutonic Knights were a Catholic military order founded around 1190 in the Holy Land. They soon became a crusading order, tasked with defending Catholics first in the Holy Land and later in Eastern Europe. They were warrior monks with a strict hierarchy who swore vows of brotherhood, chastity, poverty, and obedience. They lived in fortified castle monasteries, dressed in white mantles with a black cross. After losing ground in the Holy Land, the order redirected its efforts to the Baltic Crusades, focusing on conquering the Old Prussians, Lithuanians, and related Baltic peoples. Through bloody campaigns, they established the state of the Teutonic Order, becoming widely feared for their discipline and battlefield cohesion. They ran one of the most militarized states in medieval Europe, with nearly every city designed as a fortress network. The order's power was broken in 1410 at the Battle of Tannenberg, where a combined Polish-Lithuanian army inflicted a catastrophic defeat and killed much of the order's leadership. Crushing war reparations and the ransom of captured knights left the order financially crippled, while the Christianization of Lithuania made further crusades illegal. In 1525, the order was secularized during the rise of Protestantism, gutting their power. But the former Baltic state of the order eventually evolved into Prussia, which later became the military core of the German Empire. The order still exists today as a religious institution. The Varangian Guard was an elite unit of the Byzantine army that served as a personal bodyguard of the emperors. Originally composed of Norse Viking warriors, later reinforced by Anglo-Saxons, it became famous as a force of ruthless and highly effective mercenaries motivated by wealth and prestige. The Guard was established in 988 when Emperor Basil II requested military support from Vladimir I of Kiev. 6,000 warriors were sent to Constantinople. Entry into the Varangian Guard required origin from northern lands and a strong reputation. Positions were highly competitive, resulting in extreme loyalty to both the unit and the emperor. The Varangians acted as elite shock troops, suppressed revolts, carried out assassinations and enforced law. They were known for brutal close quarters fighting with two-handed axes, swords and spears, but also served as jailers and torturers in the Numera prison. Under Basil II, they waged brutal campaigns against the Bulgar Empire, which culminated in the Battle of Clydion. They later fought in the partial reconquest of Sicily and at the Battle of Cannae against the Lombards, which ended in a decisive Byzantine victory. At the Battle of Manzikert, the Varangian Guard held their ground against the Seljuk Turks, but surrounded and cut off, they were eventually overwhelmed and massacred. Over time, the Guard's numbers declined and their influence faded as the Byzantine Empire weakened. The Mongol Kheshig were the elite cavalry special forces of Genghis Khan. They were exceptionally well paid, stood above all other units and guarded the Khan day and night in rotating shifts. Genghis selected members only based on merit, personal loyalty and proven battlefield skill. Selection was extremely strict and included tests of strength, endurance, wilderness survival, elite horsemanship and mounted archery against moving targets at full gallop. Their families lived in protected areas under the Khan's authority. Training focused on mounted archery, wrestling, maneuvers, and learning to sleep in the saddle during long marches or changing horses mid-gallop. Their primary weapon was the Mongol composite bow with draw weights of 160 pounds. The Kheshig pioneered tactics such as the feigned retreat, excelled in siege warfare and participated in every major Mongol campaign. After the collapse of the Mongol Empire, Kheshig units continued in successor Khanates. Their descendants are believed to survive among the modern Kheshigtan clan in Inner Mongolia. The Mamluks were elite mounted warriors who served the Egyptian Ayyubid sultans. They were slave soldiers recruited from Kipchaks, Georgians and other peoples of the Eurasian steppe, selected for physical strength. Converted to Islam, they were raised as professional soldiers and given the highest level of military training. Mamluks lived permanently in barracks, training together. The result? Highly disciplined cavalrymen skilled with the bow, lance, sword and mace. They were well equipped, well paid and completely focused on warfare in service to their ruler. During the 7th Crusade in 1249, the Mamluks defeated the French Crusaders and captured their king. They later drove the Templars out of Egypt and the Levant. They then established their own sultanate, ruling Egypt and Syria for 250 years. The Mamluks were also the first to decisively defeat the Mongols in open battle at Ain Jalut. Later, Napoleon invaded and took some Mamluks into his imperial guard. After the French left in 1801, the Mamluks continued to fight for independence against the Ottoman Empire under Muhammad Ali, who eventually massacred them and brought their era to an end. The Berserkers were an elite Viking warrior brotherhood who served as royal bodyguards and shock troops. They were considered extremely dangerous and skilled, but difficult to control. They wore bear or wolf pelts and entered battle after rituals through self-induced trance or weird mushrooms. Sagas claim they felt no pain and were immune to iron and fire, but after battle they were completely exhausted and weak. They charged without formation, screaming, biting their shields, sometimes fighting naked or even killing each other before battles began. King Harald Fairhair used berserkers as bodyguards and vanguard in battles during his unification of Norway, but their lack of control could be disastrous. At the Battle of Stiklestad in 1030, King Olaf Haraldsson placed berserkers at the front of his formation, but they broke ranks to attack and contributed to his defeat. Other legends describe 12 berserkers defending King Hrolf Kraki against hundreds, and a single berserker at Stamford Bridge taking out 40 men before being killed. As Scandinavia converted to Christianity by the 12th century, berserker behavior was outlawed. Roman legionaries were the soldiers who turned Rome from a city-state into an empire. Their tactics were superior to any rival. Veteran legions of commanders like Scipio, Lucullus, and Caesar were nearly unbeatable, to the point that kings preferred submission over facing them in war. At first, only Romans could become legionaries, and their training was relentless. Daily weapons practice, drills, swimming, and forced marches under full load in tight formation. Centurions led from the front and fought alongside their men, enforcing discipline through punishment. Cowards were stoned by their comrades. A single legion of 5,000 men defeated forces 3 times its size. The Roman legions built an empire from Scotland to the Euphrates in Iraq, feared for their iron discipline, siege weapons, and testudo formations that absorbed arrows. Legionaries carried up to 45 kilograms of equipment and were expected to build a fortified camp every single night during campaigns. However, by the 4th century, Rome began recruiting barbarians, weakening discipline. Professional soldiers were expensive, and when the empire could no longer afford them, legions fractured into private armies loyal to generals, destroying what had once been a perfect military machine. Spartan Hoplites were the soldiers of the Greek city-state of Sparta. From age 7, boys entered the agoge training program, where they were deprived of food, sleep, shelter, and family contact, enduring constant hardship designed to instill pain tolerance, obedience, and absolute loyalty to Sparta. Training continued until age 21, and only the strongest survived to become full hoplites. Even then, Spartans lived in barracks until age 30 and trained daily, remaining full-time soldiers rather than part-time citizen farmers like other Greeks. This system produced unmatched discipline and cohesion. Spartans dominated Greece for nearly 2 centuries through tactical superiority. At Thermopylae in 480 BC, 300 Spartans and 700 allies held off a Persian force of roughly 150,000 for 3 days, killing around 10,000 before being overwhelmed. Their phalanx was considered impenetrable. But this same system was their undoing. Only sons of full Spartan citizens could serve, creating a dangerously small manpower pool. After losing 400 elite warriors at Leuctra, Sparta never recovered. Within a century, their population collapsed. The Immortals were a 10,000 strong unit of elite heavy infantry in the Achaemenid Persian army. Their name came from the practice of immediately replacing any dead soldier. Recruited mainly from Persian elites, they helped expand Persian rule from India to Greece and Scythia, and from Egypt to Central Asia and Babylon. The regiment was followed by a big caravan of decorated carriages, servants, concubines, and special food reserved for them. The Immortals served as the vanguard of Persian armies and directly protected the King of Kings. At Thermopylae, they were the force that ultimately flanked the Spartans after 3 days of fighting, but they had a critical weakness in close combat. Their wicker shields couldn't block Greek spears, and their scale armor was inferior to solid bronze. At the Battle of Plataea, they were cut down by Greek hoplites, their short spears ineffective against the 3-meter Greek dory. They declined as Persian military dominance faded and were ultimately eclipsed by Macedonian warfare. The Macedonian Silver Shields were a hand-picked elite infantry unit that served first under Philip II and then Alexander the Great. They wore bronze armor and carried large shields, spears, and swords. In battle, they protected the flanks of the main Macedonian phalanx. They excelled in storming fortified cities and were often used in sieges. They saw action in the Thracian campaign in 335 BC and took part in the invasion of the Achaemenid Empire. Outside combat, they served as the king's personal security. Alexander's death abruptly halted the army and plunged the empire into chaos. The Silver Shields aligned with Eumenes during the Wars of the Diadochi. At the Battle of Gabion in 316 BC, the now 60-year-old Silver Shields butchered 5,000 enemy troops without suffering a single loss. But then Antigonus I captured their baggage train, which contained their families and 40 years of accumulated plunder. To recover their possessions, one of their commanders betrayed Eumenes to Antigonus, and he was executed. Antigonus then dismantled the unit, viewing it as too dangerous. Many were exiled, and the Silver Shield's numbers now dwindled fast after 4 decades of continuous victory. The Assyrian Royal Guard, known as the Kurbutu, were the hand-picked elite troops of the Neo-Assyrian kings, likely recruited from the nobility. Numbering around 1,000, the unit included heavy infantry, spearmen, cavalry, and chariot forces. They served as the king's personal bodyguard on the battlefield, surrounding him. They also used terror tactics like mass executions, flayings and impalements to compel cities to surrender without fighting. The Royal Guard reached its peak alongside the expansion of the Neo-Assyrian Empire and remained active until the empire's collapse around 605 BC.